Well, it's great to be here. You know, I love Gettysburg. I just love coming to this town. It's so nice. I work in Washington, okay? It's great to come to a nice place. My executive producer is here tonight of the Chris Matthews Show. Where's Nancy Nathan? There she is right back there. I want to thank you for organizing this tonight. Nancy and David, there's her husband. And most importantly is Caroline here tonight. Caroline just led your golf team to victory today. In the Dickinson Invitational, she was the low scorer, which I understand in golf it's better to have a low score, and she had the lowest. Congratulations, Caroline. I hope you bring more and more greatness to this school, the great Gettysburg College, which is so great already. It is so great. I mean it. I really like coming up here. And I want to talk about politics tonight in a nonpartisan way, despite what Susan said. Believe none of that stuff she said about politics. I love my job. Anyway, it's perfect for me. I get to say what I want, basically, and I get to interview and challenge the toughest politicians in the country. And sometimes, if I'm really lucky, I get to beat them. And sometimes they challenge me to duels and all crazy stuff. And every weekend I get to, thanks to Nancy, I get to interview the best print journalists in the country. And so I really get the best job of all, and it pays better than senators do. Anyway, a lot better. Anyway, not that that's important. I wish you all well in your careers. I always say to people when I meet them in college that your dreams are the first draft of the future. Isn't that amazing? What you're thinking about doing with your lives is going to be what the country is in 30, 40 years. Because what else is it going to be? What do you guys make it? How's that for profundity? It happens to be true, too. So I want to talk about this election. Every day I cover politics and what happened that day, the nonsense, the lipstick on the pig, ridiculousness, the everything. You know, I feel like I wish I could get John McCain in the room. I said, Senator, are you saying your opponent called your running mate a pig? Are you really saying that? And if you're not, let's drop this stupid conversation, because that's what all these ads are about, you know. But they always get to do these clever ads. I stand by the ad. You know, and the ad is very tricky. Look, this election, there's some, you know, remember this, I got to tell this political story because it's my favorite political story, and it's my only really, really good one, okay? I'm from Philly, obviously. You see the speed in which I talk, attitude, beautiful herb. It's the language I was raised with. Remember Bill Bradley, the great basketball player, played for Princeton? Remember him? He was he was a scholar athlete, the kind of kid you hate in school, you know? They're good at everything. He was a Rhodes Scholar and all that. Anyway, he was about to give a speech like this, only at daytime, and they were actually feeding him a meal. That was different. And he was sitting at a head table. I'm not getting scratched. And he's sitting at a meal, and he's about to be introduced, and a waiter comes by and rather nicely puts one of those little squares of butter with the cardboard behind it on the plate in front of him. And Bradley rather arrogantly said to the guy, "Hey, bud, give me 2 of those." And the waiter said, "Sorry, one to a customer." And Bradley said, "I don't think you know who I am." And the waiter said, "I don't. Who are you, bud?" And he said, "I'm Bill Bradley." And that didn't work. And then he said, "I played basketball at Princeton 3 years, All-American, three-time All-American. I won a Rhodes Scholarship. I went to Oxford. I got a master's degree. I came back. I played for the New York Knicks, 10 years All-Star national champs. I got elected to the United States Senate from New Jersey." And the waiter said, "I don't think you know who I am." And Bradley said, "All right, who are you?" He said, "I'm the guy in charge of the butter." See, that's what politics is all about. The reason I tell that story, by the way, I heard that story from Mr. Excitement, Al Gore. Al Gore was, before he won his Nobel Peace Prize, was so boring that his Secret Service code name was Al Gore. Nobody was after him. Well, anyway, that's a story about politics. This is about the fact that you always have to deal with somebody. You always got to deal with somebody. And in this case, guess who they have to deal with? The guys running for president this year, Barack and McCain. They got to deal with Pennsylvania. Guess what? This state's in charge of the butter. This is the state that the Republicans have targeted. They know they have to pick it up. They got to poach it from the Democrats. It's usually a blue state. They got to make it a red state, or they lose. But if they get it, they win. This is how central this state is. It's so unusual that Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, lives up to its name this time. I want to get to that. It'll take me 10 minutes. But here's what's happening this election. Every night I do the diddly stuff sometimes in politics. What happened that day? As I said, the lipstick's nonsense. I want to talk about how we got to this year. It's so amazing, and where we're going to come out of this year. Because I'm going to try to be historic. You know, big picture. The past tells us a lot about this election. And this election is going to tell us about the future. Is everybody registered? Is there anybody who have a bonehead not to register to vote in this election? You're not going to be able to live with your kids. You're not going to be able to live with your grandkids. They're going to say, well, how'd you vote, mommy or daddy, in the amazing 2008 presidential election? And you said, I didn't get there. I had to check my email. You know, I had to do something. I had to get a latte, and it was better or something, blah, blah. I was studying. No, it's better to vote than to study this time. This is more important. It's more important because it's going to set the direction. Now, you're right. I did get to cover things like the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I was there the night it opened, or almost opened. It was raining. And I was on the East Berlin, the communist side. And I was just walking around in my usual way, humbly. And I knew some Deutsch from school, you know, ich habe kleine Deutsch, or ich spreche ein bisschen, or whatever you say. And you know, 2 Jahre im Gymnasium, for those who know. And 2 Jahre in Universität. And 2 Jahre in the Universität. And so I go around, I find some grad student who knows more German than I do, and then I got interviewing the crowd. I said, what's freedom mean to you people? Because they're waiting for the Berlin Wall. And all my life, I waited for communism, the threat that would bury. We were all hiding. When we were kids, by the way, we used to hide under school desks. These little balsa wood desks. And the nuns would tell us to get, I went to Catholic school, they'd say, get under the desk and hide because they're about to be an air raid and they're going to bomb us with nuclear weapons. Get under your desk. And we count to 15, or it was 15 minutes to be the general judgment, and then Jesus would be judged. But he managed to pack a lot of religion into these air raid drills. So we grew up during that. So obviously the end of the Cold War was a big deal for people my age. And everybody here my age knows, because we always thought it would end in hell. This whole thing would blow up because there was eventually going to be a mistake, and we're going to fight the Soviets, and it would be over. And somehow smart people on both sides, including Mr. Khrushchev, people like that got us through it. Smart people did not take us to war. They knew it would be the end. And people like Kennedy and Ike and Khrushchev, study your history. They all could have gotten it wrong, and they got it right. So we've been very lucky in picking the leaders we picked, especially during that incredible period. I was also in South Africa. By the way, I asked somebody, what's freedom mean to you? And you know what somebody said to me? A young guy in his 20s. He said, talking to you. I remember that. Because a lot of these values things we argue about are really true. They really are true. We say freedom, and we argue, well, that's just a word. Well, sometimes it's really a word when you don't have it. So it was for real. I was in South Africa when they let the blacks vote for the first time. I was with Bishop Tutu the whole day. That was real. People believe in democracy in South Africa because of one guy, Mandela. He taught them into it. He said, this is going to work for us. We don't need a war. And it works. So leaders can make a difference. They can bring peace where there's war, or could be war. They can avoid cataclysms if they do their job right. Politics matters. You laugh at it, keep laughing. Because in the end, the people who run the country run your life. And if they do it right, they leave you alone. So it matters. That's my kind of politics. Leave me alone. We've had some amazing elections in not in my lifetime, but in the 20th century, and I know all about it, and you studied them in school. The 32 election, which brought us Franklin Roosevelt. The 1980 election, which cost me my job. The election of Ronald Reagan. Those were big elections, really big elections, because they said it, they changed the direction of the country. Other great elections. Dwight Eisenhower's election in 1952. John F. Kennedy's in 1960. Richard Nixon's in 68. 76, Jimmy Carter. Bill Clinton. Bush, 2000. All were change elections where we got rid of one party and we brought another one in because they didn't like the way the other party was doing it. And we have that situation now. Bush is not popular. Is that a profundity? That wouldn't be accused of being a partisan statement. It's just a fact. And we know the reasons: the economy, the war in Iraq, some of the dishonesty that led into the war with Iraq. A lot of that is general information now. It is not partisan, let me tell you. So in every election, when you look back at it, the interesting thing about every election when you look back, when you get rear view mirrors, is you know exactly why the in-party lost and why the out-party won. You know, it's so clear as a bell if you look back, even a couple days back. Oh, I know why those guys got bombed out of there. I know why the Republicans lost the White House. I know why the Democrats lost the White House. Something happened that really required the voters, with their crude device of a voting opportunity, have to say no to. Because you really only get to vote yes or no when you go in that booth. Do you like the way things are going, or you don't like the way things are going? If you like the party in power, you go, yeah, keep it up. If you don't, you write no. That's generally how people vote. It may not be that way this year. That's the way it's always been. Yes or no. It's a binary system. It's a crude tool, but it's all you got. You get to say, I like the way you're doing it. I like this crowd. Or I want to try the other crowd. In 52, well, obviously in 32, it was the Great Depression. 25% of the people unemployed. We've never seen anything like that since then. People were jumping out of windows. You know, people were dying in New York as they were jumping out of windows because the economy was crashing. 1980, it wasn't so bad unless you were a speechwriter for President Carter. And then you felt it. Because every time you walked into a bar room, which I used to do occasionally, you would meet friends of yours who would give you hell about the hostages in Iran, the 50 people being humiliated every day on television. The inflation rate was double digit. You don't know what it's like. You'd get a cash management account that got you 9%. You'd be losing twice that much in the inflation rate that day. Oh, great, I'm getting 9% in my money market account. Yeah, and the inflation rate's 18. So you're losing money just by owning it. Interest rates were through the roof, double digit inflation. Americans, we're not Brazilians. We hate this stuff. We hate it. We're almost German when it comes to inflation. Americans hate it. What else? Iran, the hostages. So it was the three I's: inflation, Iran, interest rates, and Iran. My president, Jimmy Carter, who I really like, got bounced. Ronald Reagan came in. In 1952, it was Korea, the Korean War. Ike said, I will go to Korea. Before he even was inaugurated, he went to Korea. By June of 1953, we had an armistice. That war was over. And everybody who compares Iraq to Korea ought to note one fact. That war ended at the 38th parallel. There wasn't any more fighting. It wasn't like Iraq. It's not like the occupation of Iraq. We don't occupy South Korea. We have troops there. We don't occupy that country. Big difference. 1960, it looked like Ike was losing a few steps. The Republicans were losing power. The issue was get the country moving again. We had Sputnik. We had the Cuban takeover by the communists. We had the U-2 flight, a lot of embarrassments. Kennedy came along and said, let's get the country moving again. But the big thing he had going for him was the economy was weak. We had 1 million people unemployed the last 3 months of that election period. Nixon lost to Kennedy because the unemployment rate just spiked. 1968, the Vietnam War. So Nixon came in because people like me thought he would actually end the war, although I voted for Humphrey. I thought in my first vote, I thought Nixon would be a little faster at getting us out of there. Watergate got Carter elected in 76. Everybody knew why. 1992, it's the economy. Stupid Bill Clinton came slipping in there because there was a three-way race, and one man was certifiably insane. That was Ross Perot, who was truly nutty, and people still voted for him. They were so angry. 19% of the country voted for a guy who said the North Vietnamese were running across his front lawn, ruining his daughter's wedding. But they were so angry, they voted for this guy. By the way, I think he was featured a lot on Saturday Night Live. In 2000, no matter what the Democrats like to tell you, the reason that election was so close the Supreme Court got to control it was Monica. The Democrats hate to hear that word. It was Monica. The embarrassment of the White House. And poor Al Gore got to be the bathtub ring of the Clinton administration. He got blamed for something he didn't do. But this country wanted a change. I'm sorry, that's what. How else do you explain the 2000 election of George Bush? You got to have some information on that one because people will ask you that one. So here we are in 2008. The interesting thing about big elections, and I think this is a big one, like 32 or 80, because we have big problems, big problems. We're in Iraq. The president says we can't spare a man or a woman in that country. If you say we're winning, how come we can't leave? We are stuck. We have to be there. We're there interminably without any hope of being able to pull out. Right now, the president says we need every single troop we got there. That's how tricky it is. And everybody who knows that situation knows The surge did a good job, but we are nowhere near having control of that country to be able to walk away and give it to the Iraqi government that we've stood up. Nobody believes it's done. And this is now 5 years in. That's a long war for America. This is a long one for us. And Americans don't like long wars. If you look at the economy, the unemployment rate is going up at 6.1. It was 4.2 when Bush came in. It's growing. It's getting higher. It'll be higher next month. We're now borrowing. We owe $10 trillion as a country. It's almost a fifth of the world economy we owe right now. We owe it, and a lot of it increasingly to China. The decisions being made sometimes baffle me. We've just decided to spend $1 billion on Georgia for its infrastructure. Why not on Pennsylvania's infrastructure? Just a decision that we make. These decisions are very ideological. They're very strong-minded. This president knows what he wants to do. He's very much in league with the neoconservatives. He knows what he wants to do. He wants to spread democracy the way he wants to do it, using firepower largely. He knows what he's up to. The Democrats haven't offered a completely clear alternative, by the way, to that yet. But what we know is when you have a very tricky election in a very important time, whether it's 32 or 1980 or right now, the people make interesting decisions. They oftentimes elect a person, it seems to me, not just to solve the problem that exists, but they oftentimes pick somebody they never would have picked in a million years, like Ronald Reagan or Franklin Roosevelt, a man with a third-rate mind, a B-movie actor. They're not the normal people that would have won. But they won because the country drastically needed change, and it voted for somebody they normally would never have elected. And so we get to the question now. We know we have an election. We know it's coming up in November. And so the question has to occur to us, what exactly is the problem? If you could look at it in a rearview mirror, a month after the election, 10 years after the election, what would you say the problem was that made people want change in 2008? And then you have to ask, which of the two candidates, the Republican maverick, McCain, or the Democrat, Barack Obama, is the most ideally suited to solve the current problem? What is the problem? What is the solution? If you get your head around that, I think you're thinking about this election in historic terms. You're understanding how it's going to look in the history books, and that short sentence or two that's going to run those history books, like the immediate causes of the war, you know those things, or the long-term causes of the war, or why this person was elected. I think the best way to vote now is think like, almost like an historian. What is going to be seen as the key to this election? Because it's going to be close, and I have no idea who's going to win right now. And I do this like a lot of the people I work with for a living, and we have no idea. We cannot. It's 46-46 in the latest Newsweek poll. And the poll, I think Palin has peaked. I think her dazzle factor is probably reached some point of diminishing returns. I think that McCain has had a good run until we got into reality the last couple of days. And reality, I mean that it's not. We're not talking about lipstick today. We're talking about a market that lost 500 points and $700 billion in one day. The American economy, $700 billion in one day. And it could happen again tomorrow after this little hesitation today, this little pushback. We have no idea what's going to happen with AIG in terms of its insurance, if the government's going to be able to back it up, if it's going to work. We have no idea if this whole financial crisis is going to come to an end of some kind, a soft landing, or it's going to continue to metastasize. We don't know, and nobody knows. Except I was advised by amazing people the other day, get your money out of any account that's not fully insured. Any bank account, get it out of it. Get it into where it's fully insured. That's how tricky this is. Old banks are going to look good. I think hiding money under the bed's going to look good. At least, you know, the bed's there. This is tricky. McCain's running as a non-Republican. I had somebody on tonight, who was it tonight, that said, oh, he's not, oh yeah, Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney's sort of endorsing McCain, although they're all hoping that the party candidate of their party loses so they can run next time, right? You know, are they all doing that? I don't know. That would be naughty. So he's saying that this guy's, I said that the Republicans have had their chance. Doesn't the other party get a chance? And I said, it's not about the Republicans. It's about McCain or Barack. Okay. By the way, sometimes say Obama with an apostrophe now, ever since he put Biden on the ticket. It's a little Irish thing. It would help. It would help. It would help in Scranton. A few other places, a few other Irish boroughs would be impressed with that. McCain's running as Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster. He's today talking about the greed on Wall Street. He's trying to run as Teddy Roosevelt. He's trying to get away from the Taftite party. He's trying to get away from the establishment Republican Party. Smart move. He's got to. He's got to run as a guy who wants to break up the establishment, take on corruption, deal with the lack of good regulation, bring back good regulation. Don't run as the defender of the status quo, because the status quo can't be defended right now, I don't think. So he knows what he's doing. He is running he is the one Republican who has a good chance of being elected president. If you look at all the candidates they had, the one that could win, still win, clearly, 50-50 right now. Obama's running with, to me, a radical alternative, offering a radical alternative to Bush. And you ought to think about this if you want this, because he is offering something very different. Yeah, you can say more taxes for certain people at the top, and maybe some taxes for people, upper middle income people. Let's not kid ourselves. Government costs money. It's not free. They don't give it away. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And if you want to do more in government and public sector activity, you got to admit you have to pay for it, or else you're just not telling the truth. So what is that alternative to what we have now? Right now we have sort of a laissez-faire government, which is big on military spending, big on borrowing from abroad, big for basically kind of a spend a lot of money, borrow a lot of money, and fight a lot of wars. That's this party. That's what we got. We got a very busy military. And when they start talking about fighting Russia, I just don't know what army they have to spare right now. It is really tricky. The American army's in Arabia right now in a defensive deployment in the country of Iraq, surrounded by very difficult people who don't mind us being there because it makes us get drained the way the Turks got drained back in the First World War. So what would the Democrats offer? I think what Barack is offering is a revived public sector. A public sector that recognizes that it's got a big partnership role to play in American economic development. Now, this is a profound thing here. If you listen to Barack, he talks about energy and the need of the government to take a role in developing alternative energy sources. Not just drill, 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 but alternative energy sources, wind and everything, and solar and everything. And it's an amazing proposition, and it's not going to be cheap. But as long as the price of gas keeps going up, it gets more and more economical to think about alternatives. We know that. If the gas was still $1.25, back when I was in high school, it was 30 cents, 25 cents. We used to find Scotties. You could get it down to about 18 and 18.9. They didn't wash your windows. But boy, was it fun to fill the tank for $1.50. Climate change. The Democrats really believe we got to do something about it. Man's role in climate change and really, really offsetting the trend of history so far. Infrastructure. It's got to be the most boring word in the history of man. I don't know who came up with it. It means neat things like trains, but they call it infrastructure. I mean, it's great. It's about getting here to there fast, efficiently. It's about subways in cities that aren't 150 years old like most of them are right now. It means bridges that don't fall. It means 95 that doesn't just come apart. It means like in Minnesota, that bridge that just fell down out there. You know, it means things that work, big train stations. You know, like in the movies, you know, it's fun. You get from one city to the next without, anyway. Education, public education. That's another thing the Democrats believe in, lots of it. Real emphasis on it, all the way up from K to the university level. Regulation, that's looking pretty good. I mean, Roosevelt started that in the 30s with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I think people understand the importance of regulation now. Deregulation sounded like fun for a while there until you try to get on an airplane. If you've ever tried to do that lately, deregulation hasn't been wonderful. So I think we're revisiting a real philosophical question, especially for young people. People my age remember these decisions. Reagan said, get rid of the government, government's not the solution, it's the enemy. He said, it's not the solution, it's the problem. Get rid of all government, deregulate everything, do it. The private sector will take care of everything. Well, we see the problem. The private sector is Lehman Brothers. The private sector is Merrill Lynch. The private sector is an auto industry that's dying. And so you got to say, what happened to the public sector? And so the Democrats are saying, no, you're not going to make American mixed capitalism work without a vibrant public sector, unless you've got the factors of production, which is reasonably cheap and efficient, and clean energy, which is what we had, cheap energy for most of this century. Good transportation systems, good education systems. When I look at the When I look at what the presidents we've had, I wonder where they came from. They were so great. How did Abraham Lincoln, in the middle of the Civil War, with the Capitol half built, and he's defending himself against Virginia. Virginia's right there, and it's at war with him. And it's right there. They got the rebel flag over there. General Lee's over there. They're fighting us and coming up to Gettysburg. They're the enemy, and they're right here. And while he's doing that, while he's defending us against us, he started the Land-Grant College Act. And so suddenly the United States of America in 1863 created land-grant colleges all across the United States using right-of-way money for the railroads. And you know what? We created scientific agriculture. And so the only country in the world that could feed the rest of the world. Lincoln did that while he was fighting the Civil War and trying to put the dome on the Capitol. He was a multitasker from heaven. Think about what he did. Roosevelt winning the war against the Nazis and the Japanese Empire. At the same time, he's thinking, how about all these guys and women out there fighting this war? Wouldn't it be great if they could become middle class instead of going back to living in row houses after this is all over and being working people again? Why don't we give them a chance to become middle class? How about they all go to college on us? And so my dad got to go to college. He went to Drexel in engineering. And all these guys, mostly guys, but women too, all these people got the GI Bill because the president in the middle of a war said, how about the big picture here? How about we make a middle class? So they had big ideas, and they were in education, and they were in transportation. Ike, in the middle of the 50s, Grandpa, in the middle of the 50s, when everybody was screaming like Rockefeller and Kennedy were saying, we got to have more missiles, more missiles, more missiles, Ike said, no, we don't. We got enough missiles. How about we build an interstate highway system? How's that for an idea? So today, instead of chugging along through the speed traps across the United States, we actually can get on 80 and 70 and 95. Ike had that idea. So you think big. And then what else he had? He had the idea of taking kids like me and letting them go to college. Because in 1950, right after Sputnik, he created something called the National Defense Education Act, which meant if you went to college, for me, half your school, in my case, we borrowed half the money at 3%. That's a good deal. 3%. And you could pay it off after you're in the Peace Corps, after you're in the military, after you paid the grad school. Take your time. 3%. How many of you guys got a 3% loan? That is a good deal. And Ike did that so that people like me could all become the second generation of middle-class people. So presidents are capable of big-picture decision-making. I got a fellowship in North Carolina, full ride. Of course, I was about to be drafted, but that's all right. I got a full ride down there, too, from the NDA fellowship. And a lot of people here have gotten those. All because presidents thought big picture about education and about transportation and about scientific farming, and all this thing that led to the fact that we got to, you think we got to be the richest country in the world by accident? It's because there was a public sector that was smart, and a public sector that helped the private sector. And this became the one place in the world where every ethnic group in the world, to this day, still comes, every single ethnic group from every single country in the world still comes to the United States, and every single one of them does better here than where they came from. Every single one is the one country everybody wants to get to because there's something magic in the air. What it is mixed capitalism. It's freedom with a smart public sector. We have the best public education in the world, the university system that nobody in the world has, a medical institution that nobody has because we built it up in terms of public and private responsibility. And it's somewhere in the last 20 years, we forgot the public part. And I think that Barack is pushing. I'm not sure he says it the way I said it. Maybe it would scare people if he said it that way. But I'm trying to say it the way it's going to be if he gets in there. And I have no idea if he's going to get in there. And here's why all of this is important and why this election is important. If you're 20 years old right now, let me place a bet for you. If you're still alive, you'll be 40 in 20 years. That's my bet. I always say to people, they say, should I go to law school? Well, in 20 years, you'll either have gone to law school or not, but you will be 40. I can predict that. So if you want to be a 40-year-old lawyer, here's how to do it. Go to law school. If you don't want to be a 40-year-old lawyer, you want to be talking about it in 20 years, don't go, but still be talking about it. So get to it. 20 years from now, people will look back on this election and say, what did we accomplish? And what was important? And we choose between this sort of maverick McCain, who's somewhere between Teddy Roosevelt and George Bush. Let's be brutal. He supports 90% of the Bush program. He's somewhere. He's sort of some sort of combination of the two, maverick and regular. And you can argue what piece of it you think he is or what mostly he is, but he is. Barack offers a totally different view. He's more of an interesting social democrat. I'm sure he wouldn't like that title, but that's what he is. And I think he's interesting for a number of reasons, which we can talk about, and I'm sure it'll come up. But here's the choice confronting you. Do you want to have a country that's able to compete in the 21st century with the success and the magic with which it competed in the 20th century? Do you want another American century? Well, if you do, then you have to use the common sense of, do you want those factors that led to the competitive ability of our country in the 20th century? What were they? Scientific agriculture, the best educational institutions in the world. What else? Cheap energy, which we got to find another way of getting, cleaner. We have to do that. Transportation systems to beat the band. The railroad system, everything we have in this country. The highway system, like no country has, all built by public action. Education, infrastructure, energy, put it together. What else? Regulation, smart regulation like we had in the 30s, which has sort of come crumbling apart. So you put all that together, the public sector piece, and you have a good shot at being able to compete like we're going to have to compete in the 21st century. And this is what we're up against. We won the Cold War. And you can share the glory of that to a lot of people, from Eisenhower to Kennedy to Nixon to everybody else who fought the Cold War. You can spread it around. But it's been won. And we've got sort of the Chinese curse now. We got what we wanted. We prayed every Sunday at Mass, if you're Catholic, for the conversion of Russia. Guess what? It's converted. In a worst way, it's a capitalist country now. They have a lot of oil, and they're really obnoxious about it, okay? This guy Putin looks like a little bit like he really likes being rich, and he likes having a rich country behind him. And so we have to compete in this century, you kids coming out of Gettysburg, with the following countries we didn't have to worry about in the past because they weren't really capitalist yet, or what they are in terms of competition capitalists. They're called the BRIC countries. Russia, India, China, Brazil. They're going well, they're booming. And if you put those countries together and their economies together, and this will blow your minds, and throw in Mexico, and they'll be beating the G7 in 20 years. They'll be beating the countries we assume are always going to be the rich countries because of their growth rates and because they're just going to do it. And so we got to get out there and compete for resources, for everything. The fight over oil right now, the $4 tank of gas, is merely the first symptom of the fact that the United States, us, we're going to have to compete with the world for every resource there is, including wood, because the Chinese can come here right now and buy most of it. They have the unbelievable economic ability to buy basically what they want. They can compete. You say drill offshore, yeah, the Chinese will ask for that oil. Do you think the oil companies will say, oh, no, this is for Americans? No, we can't sell it to you. Oh, you want to offer us a higher price? Oh, no, we couldn't take that. We got to give it to the Americans at a lower price. That's how multinationals always behave. So you got to compete for everything, and this country is going to find itself facing a Niagara Falls of challenges in this century. And I do believe we've got it in us to put it together. And we do it in elections, we do it, if not this election, someone later than this, the country's going to find itself putting together the old magic of a public and a private sector that works together. Smart regulation, public education, infrastructure, energy, all the decisions that were made, whether it was the oil depletion allowance or whatever else was made back in the 20s, all those decisions have to be remade again if we're going to rebuild the 21st century and compete as well as we did in the 20th century. And by the way, the hallmark of every advanced society is its ability to rebuild and invest. The problem of every developing society is its inability to invest. Go visit one. Fixing up, painting, rebuilding, investing in the future, building cities, building companies that will make money in the future, building farms that will make money in the future. The challenge that's ahead of the developing countries is to do what we've done before, invest and build, a combination of public and private effort. And it all has to be done by the government at the top. They've got to put this magic together. And you got two choices, McCain and Obama. Place your bets. Thank you very much.